Some houses stand as unintentional monuments to their time. Made from wood, brick, and mortar, their use grows from the simple need for comfort and protection from the outside world to storing the secrets, celebrations, and everyday lives of the families they keep. They hold inside of them simple objects, touched and used, that carry the prints of their memory.
Dr. Pound was my great-grandfather, and he and his wife got married in Mississippi. She lived in Mississippi, and he had graduated from medical school in Kentucky, and he went to Mississippi and met her, and then they got married in 1853 in November, and then they started on to towards Dripping Springs, at that time. And also her, Sarah Pound's sister was Indiana Moss, and her husband John, and the two families came together from Mississippi, and they first settled in Henley, and then Dr. Pound liked this area the best, and he bought 700 acres in here, in this area.
Dr. Pound's migration from Mississippi into Texas wasn't the first time he'd ever stepped foot into the relatively young state. The United States Congress, after much debate mostly about slavery, passed an annexation resolution on February 28, 1845, that would allow Texas to become a state, and on December 29, 1845, Texas entered the Union. War soon broke out between the United States and Mexico over this annexation. It was around this time when, at the age of 19, Dr. Pound volunteered to fight in the war and enlisted as a private in the Company A Quincy Riflemen. He then marched through and fought for the state that would become his home. When the war ended in 1848 with the United States defeating Mexico, Texas fully and completely became a part of the Union. Texas was a slave state, and in early 1850s tax assessments for Joseph Pound under the category Negroes listed 2. Their names are unknown, but what is known is that it was their hands that built the original log cabin where Dr. Pound and his wife Sarah began to raise their growing family.
It was one of the first schoolhouses, and my great-grandmother would teach the children piano lessons when they came here to go to school, and it was also one of the first church services were here, and they had a circuit rider, preacher, a Methodist minister that would come about once a month, and we had church services.
Dripping Springs being so sparsely populated, it was difficult for Dr. Pound to make a living simply on his practice. On tax forms of the time, he lists his occupation as farmer. Compounding to the Pounds' hardship in 1861 was the loss of their 3-year-old daughter, Olive Allen. This photograph is believed to be that of Olive, taken shortly before she died. But even with such great tragedy, there were events taking place outside of the farmstead that would have a greater effect on the Pound family. On April 12, 1861, Civil War broke out in the United States. Just 2 months earlier, in February 1861, Texas broke away from the Union it so recently joined under the belief that a centralized government cannot dictate to any state that it may or may not own slaves. Texas, now a Confederate state, would fight against the Union for the next 4 blistering and bloody years. On December 25, 1861, Dr. Pound enlisted into the Confederate Army. Then, leaving behind Sarah and their 3 small surviving daughters on the farmstead, Dr. Pound rode to Dallas. It's believed scarlet fever was the illness that caused Dr. Pound to serve only a short time with his company in Arkansas before being discharged on the 30th of June, 1862. Not much survives that tells us how Dr. Pound served in the war. One document, proudly displayed by the Pound family on a wall in the parlor, is Dr. Pound's United Confederate Veteran Certificate, dated 1896. And on this certificate is the word surgeon. Dr. Pound returned to the farmstead and, although more difficult due to blockades that narrowed such daily staples like flour, sugar, coffee, and tobacco to a trickle, life did still go on. Through this bleak time, happy news shone through in the birth of a 5th daughter to the Pounds in 1863. They named her Louisiana. Then, on April 18, 1865, the cannons quieted, rifles were put down, and the war between the states finally ended. The next year brought celebration to the farmstead when on September 4, 1866, Sarah gave birth to her first son, Charles Ward Pound. She would give birth to another son named Jonathan in 1872, but he would only live 2 months. Charles would be the only son of the Pounds who would live to adulthood. Although he would continue to farm, Dr. Pound's medical practice began to grow after the war.
Well, that was where he saw his patients in the original cabin. And this rocker is the chair that over there that he used for his patient's chair. And sometimes he went on horseback and took the saddlebags and doctored people that way. And then a lot of people came here to see him also.
As the years rolled by, Dr. Pound's standing in the community began to grow. He helped found the Dripping Springs Baptist Academy, and in 1896, he and other Civil War veterans would start the first Camp Ben McCulloch Confederate Veterans Reunion held along the banks of Onion Creek. Dr. Pound's daughters were growing up and starting to get married. Sadly, typhoid fever would claim the life of Charles at age 44. He would die in San Antonio, never having married. But all was not grief. Grandchildren were being raised, adding their memories to the farmstead. Leaving behind the horrors of wartime, Dr. Pound lived long enough to replace them with the comfort and memories of home. On October 20th, 1914, Dr. Pound would close his eyes for the last time in the house he so loved, leaving behind a legacy tightly entwined with the history of the state he chose to make his home. Sarah would follow her husband a year later, leaving the farmstead to her beloved daughters. Passed down from one generation to the next, this farmstead stands as a testament to the strength and will of the pioneering spirit.
I just love talking about the house and the family and showing people, and everybody gets so interested in it, you know, and I love telling people and seeing how they really enjoy it, you know.